The doll on the table is small, no bigger than a baby's hand, sewn by hand from undyed muslin, dressed in a little blue frock and a white bonnet. It belongs to a 7-year-old girl somewhere in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and she loves it more than anything in the world. And this doll has no face. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, blank cloth where every other doll on earth has painted eyes. You've probably seen this photo and thought, how sad, poor child. A blank $3 doll next to a talking factory one that cost $60, and you decided the Amish were simply going without. You were wrong. More wrong than you realize. Behind that blank face is a reason so simple and so deliberate that once you know it, you'll never look at any doll's face the same way again. These people know something about what you put into a child's hands, something you've never once stopped to consider. And they don't say it out loud. I'm Amos. I grew up among the people who sew these dolls in the evenings by the light of a kerosene lamp, and I'm going to tell you what the old ones knew and the outside world never understood. Today, 5 reasons this doll has no face. 3 are obvious to anyone who picks up a needle. The 4th, the modern world gets exactly backwards, it looks at the blank face and sees a lack, when what's really there is an abundance. And the 5th gets shipped overseas, sealed behind glass, by people who don't understand what they're paying for. Watch to the end and you'll see why. It's the reason they stopped telling. Let's start with a piece of cloth. Take the muslin my grandmother Katerina used to sew these dolls at the kitchen table. Not a bolt bought from a shop, but scraps, from a dress the oldest granddaughter had outgrown, from a shirt whose collar had worn through. The Amish don't throw cloth away. We used to say there's a whole doll still living inside a scrap the size of your hand. Grandmother kept those scraps in a tin cookie box, and on winter evenings, when the snow was settling outside the window, the box came out onto the table. The muslin is a little rough under your fingers, it smells of laundry dried clean in the frost and a drop of lamp kerosene, to this day that smell means home to me. Now watch how this doll is born, because the second reason is hidden in the hands themselves. Grandmother didn't cut from a paper pattern out of a magazine. She held the shape in her head from the time she was a girl, the way you hold a prayer. She'd fold the scrap in 2, trace the head, the body, 2 arms, 2 legs with a nub of chalk, and run along the edge with a small basting stitch, 12, 15 stitches to the inch, even, without a single knot showing on the outside. She'd turn it right side out through a gap left in the side, stuff it with the same cloth cut into strips, or with wool combings left over from shearing the sheep on our farm, so the doll held its shape and weighed in your hand like something alive. Then she'd close the side with a hidden stitch and sew on the bonnet and apron from a 3rd scrap. In one quiet evening, about 3 hours, a doll was finished whole. And here's what matters, it isn't a factory that sews her, and it isn't the father. It's a woman's hand, passed through a woman's hand. Great-grandmother taught grandmother, grandmother taught mother, mother taught daughter. In our world a girl sits down to her first doll at 6 or 7, under her mother's elbow, and the first crooked stitches are picked out and re-sewn until the hand remembers. To sew a doll isn't to buy a toy. It's to take up a craft that's been in our community for hundreds of years, and one day to hand it down to your own daughter at the same table. The doll in a child's hands is already a second thread tying her to a grandmother she may never have met. And then the needle reaches the place where the face belongs. And it stops. Why? Ask any of the old men and he'll point you to a single line. The book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 4, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath. To the outside world, ancient words from a book. To the Amish, a literal rule for every single day, they believe it not as a metaphor but as a direct command, and they carry it out with their hands. To draw a face, they hold, is to make a likeness of a human being, and the image of a human belongs to God alone. So the needle stops. Not out of poverty, out of obedience to a line 3,500 years old. That's why in an Amish home you won't find a photograph on the wall, or a portrait, or a mirror over the child's bed. The same line that leaves the doll's face blank takes people's faces off of pictures too, which is why the Amish are so reluctant to be photographed. One rule, stretched from the bare wall of the house all the way to the rag toy in a child's hands. What you're holding in your palm isn't an oddity, it's the edge of a whole, seamless way of life. But if it were only about an old line of scripture, the story could end here. It doesn't end. Because the next reason isn't about a prohibition at all, it's about what the blank face teaches a child, silently, every single day. The Amish have a word that doesn't exist in the English dictionary, Demut. In Pennsylvania German, humility. Not humiliation, but the knowledge that you are no higher than anyone else. It's the backbone of their way of life, that unwritten order of the community they call the Ordnung. And here's what matters. The doll's blank face is the first lesson in Demut a child receives before she can even read. Think about what a face does. It sets apart. Give two girls two dolls with faces, and within a minute one is prettier, blue eyes, golden curls, and the other is worse. Now give them two dolls without faces. They're the same. Neither one is better. And that's exactly what the Amish believe about people. Before God all faces are equal, and to rank one above another is vanity. The blank cloth isn't a lack. It's a lesson sewn into a toy. Take no pride in a face, not your own and not anyone else's. I've seen this lesson work with my own eyes. My sister Miriam, in 1958, she was 9 then, came to grandmother with a request, let her doll have eyes, like the English children, like the neighbor girl from the farm across the creek. Grandmother didn't get angry, and she didn't preach a sermon. She sat Miriam down beside her, took two identical faceless dolls, and asked quietly, which of these is better? Miriam looked and said, neither, they're the same. Grandmother nodded, that's how God looks at people. And that was all. Not another word. Miriam wore that same doll out clear into her teens. That's how the Amish answer a child who asks for one, like the English, not with a prohibition, but with a question the child answers for herself. My grandmother almost never explained any of this in words. She simply sewed a doll without a face and handed it to her granddaughter. The lesson passed through the hands, not through speech. That's why it's so hard to learn about from the outside. It isn't preached. It's stitched. And here you might be thinking, all right, prohibition and humility, but what is it like for a child to play with a faceless doll? Doesn't it take something important out of childhood? Hold that question. The answer turns everything on its head, and it's exactly here that the world stumbles hardest. Before we get there, answer me honestly, in the comments, in one word. When you first saw a faceless doll, what did you feel? Sadness? Unease? Or did something click, as if there were a meaning in that blankness you couldn't quite name yet? Write it down. I really do want to know what a person on the outside sees in this. Because what comes next is about what you yourself put into that face, or into its absence. And the stakes are simple, either the blank face takes away, or it gives. There's no third option. Now put this doll in a child's hands and watch. A factory doll always has the one face. It smiles when the girl cries, it smiles when the girl is angry, it smiles at funerals and in thunderstorms, frozen on a single feeling forever. But a doll without a face changes every minute. In the morning it laughs along with the child, in the afternoon it's frightened along with her, in the evening it's tired and wants to sleep. The blank cloth is a screen onto which the child projects whatever she's feeling herself. Child psychologists have spent decades explaining why a simple toy builds imagination more powerfully than a complicated one. The less the toy does by itself, the more the child does. A doll that talks, sings, and blinks at the push of a button leaves the child in the role of spectator. A doll without a face does nothing, which means the child does everything. She gives it a voice, a mood, a face, the one she needs right now. The Amish arrived at this not through research but through faith. But the conclusion is the same, the blank face doesn't take the play away. It hands it to the child whole. And you know what's funny? The outside world caught on to this long ago, it just never understood what it was catching on to. Old Amish and Mennonite dolls from the 19th century now sit behind glass and go under the hammer for thousands of dollars. In Lancaster, half an hour's drive from the farms where dolls like these are still sewn, stands the Landis Valley Museum, and a faceless rag doll from Pennsylvania, mid-1840s, is listed there as a rarity on equal footing with a painted porcelain doll from overseas. At New York folk art auctions, a blank-faced doll like that, quilted by somebody's great-grandmother by lamplight, has been bid up higher than a French bisque beauty with real eyelashes. Collectors are paying for the blank face precisely, for the very thing you pitted in the photo. What was an everyday $3 toy for a 7-year-old girl became, for a museum, a treasure under an alarm. And here's the astonishing part, the blankness outlasted every painted face. Paint on porcelain cracks, cheeks crumble, glass eyes cloud over, but smooth muslin stays itself 150 years, because there's nothing on it to wear away. And now, the reason the world gets exactly backwards. Go back to that first thought you had at the photo, sad, poor, something missing. The whole modern view rests on one assumption, that the blank face is a minus. Take away the eyes, take away the mouth, and you're left with a lack. It's the other way around. The face wasn't taken away from the doll. The face was left to the child. Think about it. The outside world makes its toys more complicated every year, more buttons, more ready-made faces with ready-made feelings, and sincerely calls it progress. And the Amish, more than 100 years ago, went in exactly the opposite direction. They left off the face not because they couldn't draw one. The same needle that ran the whole outline of the doll in an evening could have laid down 2 eyes and a mouth without trouble. A hand that cuts shirts and quilts blankets with 100 stitches to the palm could certainly have managed a face. They stopped the needle on purpose. They understood what the world has forgotten how to see. Sometimes, to give a child more, you have to put less into her hands. A factory doll tells the child who it is. A doll without a face asks the child who it is. That question is the whole difference. One makes the child a spectator, the other a creator. The world looks at the blank cloth and sees poverty. The child holding it sees infinity, because this doll can be anyone, new every day. The blankness you pitted is the most generous thing you can put into the hands of a 7-year-old. That's the reason they don't tell. Not because they hide it, but because it isn't explained in words. It's simply sewn, evening after evening, and passed on in silence. Put it all into one picture. A woman's hand runs the needle along the muslin, stuffed with scraps of the same cloth and sheep's combings, and stops before the face, out of obedience to a line from the book of Exodus, the same one that takes faces off the photographs on the wall. The blank cloth makes all the dolls equal, the first lesson in Demut, the backbone of the Ordnung, the very one grandmother gave Miriam with a single question instead of a sermon. The absence of a face hands the play to the child, she gives the doll a feeling every hour herself, and then the museum at Landis Valley guards that blankness behind glass for a century and a half. And it all comes down to one thing, the face wasn't taken from the doll, it was left to the child. One needle that stopped. One reason with 5 faces. Not a bag of random quirks, a single thought, sewn into a rag doll in one evening by lamplight. Here's what to do tonight. Find any doll or figure in your house with a painted face, give it to a child, your own, a nephew, a neighbor's, and just watch for a minute how she plays. Then, if you have the nerve, give her a plain rag with no face instead. And watch what changes. You'll see what I've been talking about with your own eyes, in a minute, for free. And then write to me in the comments, what did a toy teach you in childhood, without a single word? The first thing that comes to memory. It matters to me to read it. And since you've watched all the way to the end, stay a little longer. The face that isn't on the doll is only the beginning. Next time I'll tell you why you won't find a single button on Amish clothing, and what they fasten it with instead. That, too, isn't poverty. And that, too, is done on purpose. I'm Amos. And now you know it too.